It's time to change up the way you introduce a new page in the method book to your piano students. Hey, I'm Phoenix and I'm the Tattooed Piano Teacher. 20 years ago when I started teaching, I introduced each new song that came up in the book in the same exact way because I thought it was the most effective way to get my students reading notes better. My heart was in the right place, but the same method didn't work for every student. Plus, you gotta change it up to keep it interesting and to keep them on their toes. If you've gotten stuck in a rut, then here are 7 ways to introduce a song. Some of them you're probably already doing, but stick around. If you want to be known as the fun piano teacher, you're definitely going to want to hear the last one, number 7. So the first way to introduce a new song in the method book, and when I say song, I mean song or piece or page, depending on how it applies, is to demonstrate it. The best time to introduce a song by demonstrating it for your piano student is when you want to evoke the expression or the unwritten part of the song that makes the magic of it. Perhaps you want to avoid some common misinterpretations. It could be because you want to demonstrate a tempo that's not so obvious, or a particular technical skill that comes up like an ornament or a tremolo, glissando, something like that. Or perhaps with this particular page, you really just want to inspire the student to want to work on it or kind of sell a piece to a student who wouldn't normally like this genre. Now, the pros of using the demonstrate it method to introduce a new page in the method book are that the student gets to hear the end result. Oftentimes, this can avoid spending a week playing the syncopation wrong, or spending a week forgetting that it has pedal in it, or so on. Your student leaves the lesson feeling inspired to work on it because they've heard how it sounds. Now, the cons to the demonstrate it method are that the student might practice it too fast because now they've heard the final tempo, or they might play it by ear more so than reading the notes because now they know what the melody sounds like. And finally, one con is that the student might get discouraged after hearing you play it so fantastically that they think that they can't do it. So that's the demonstrate it method. Use it wisely. The second way to introduce a new song to your piano students is to play them a recording of it. Now, when would you want to open up the YouTube app in a lesson and make them sit there and listen to it? Well, again, if you wanted to evoke a certain expression or musicality of a piece that you just can't tell by looking at the page, or again, you really want the student to leave the lesson feeling inspired or sold on perhaps a genre they wouldn't normally be excited about, or if the piece is an arrangement, for instance, of an orchestral piece, then you may want them to get a sense of what their fingers are trying to emulate as far as all the different instruments, who has the solos, and so on. If you really want to have a music history moment, this can be a great way to talk about the composer, the original instrumentation, the time period it comes from, and so on. The pros for playing a recording for the student as your introduction method are that they are most certainly going to feel inspired by seeing that big concert hall and the orchestra play their piece before they even play a note of it on the piano. Potential cons are that this can be time consuming, especially if the original version is quite long. You might have to cut it short, and if you get to talking about music history, if you're anything like me, all of a sudden 7 minutes have passed in the lesson. And again, there is the caveat that they may be playing by ear, having heard it before sight reading it. So the second method of introducing a new song is to play a recording of it. Now, everything that we've mentioned so far has the student listening before they ever play a note, so let's go completely in the other direction. Method number 3 to introduce a new song to piano students is to have them sight read it. Sight reading is when you are playing something you have never practiced before. So in this case, they do not know what it sounds like. They are simply diving in and seeing what they can do just by reading the page. When would you choose this method? Well, you definitely want to make sure that you have time to spend on it because some students can be quite slow sight readers. So you want to have a good chunk of time and you don't want to rush them. You also might want to use this if the student gets easily confused when they take a new song home. Having them sight read it with you right there, although it may make them a little bit nervous, is actually really helpful because you can coach them along. If they hit a wrong note or they say, "Is this right?" you're right there to answer and encourage. You might choose this method if you are working with a brand new note on the staff that they haven't seen before, a new position, a new key signature, etc. And you'll want to pick this method at least occasionally so you can continue to test their sight reading skills. Some of the pros to choosing the sight read it method are that the student's brain is challenged to read the notes having never heard the piece before. And of course, you're right there to address any issues right away so you can avoid having the student play for an entire week in the wrong position or the wrong key signature or with a fifth instead of a sixth or whatever it might be. Some of the cons are that depending on the sight reading ability of your student, this can be a very time-consuming endeavor, although thankfully you can always choose to do only one line or half the piece or whatever you have time for. Another potential con is that after sight reading, the student is so focused on note by note that they don't really get a sense of what the whole thing feels like, sounds like, the vibe of it, the tempo of it. So in some cases, you might want to do the sight read it method in conjunction with one of the listening methods. So method number 3 was sight reading it. Now, number 4, we've all done it, the send it home method. This is when you have literally 30 seconds left of your lesson and they need something new to practice. You write it in the assignment book, hand them their books, bye. Sometimes this happens just out of necessity, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. The send it home method means you don't really talk about, look at, listen, or play the song at all in your lesson. You're just assigning it and having the student do it at home. When would you use this? Of course, when you're just out of time and have no other choice. But you might also choose this method of introducing a new page, or not introducing a new page rather, if the student is a super good reader and they're very independent with kind of taking the sight reading process on their own at home independently. You might also choose this if the piece is pretty straightforward as far as the tempo and interpretation goes. It's in a position or key signature they're familiar with, and so on. So some of the pros to doing this is that the student is really challenged and you really get a good sense of how their at-home sight reading or practice is going because you know none of the information came from you. Anything they figured out correctly on the song came from them or the help of a parent. And then the obvious, this saves time in the lesson. Some of the cons to this are that in some cases when I do this, the student says, I didn't know I was supposed to practice that. Because we haven't looked at it together, they'll tell me, oh no, we didn't start that yet. And I'm like, well, I wrote it right here. But it doesn't click in their mind, or maybe they're trying to avoid having to learn it. I don't know. Any case, in some cases, they won't even touch it at all. In other cases, they'll do their very best, but they'll get something major wrong, and then it's kind of hard to unfix. Or they might just find it a frustrating experience, depending on the student. So method number 4 is the just send it home method. Method number 5 for introducing a new song to your piano students is to write hints on the page. So you can use this when you are short on time, you've only got maybe a minute or two. So you can't do one of these longer processes, but you can give them some hints so they can learn it at home. You might use this if the rhythm or the style of the song is pretty straightforward and all they're gonna need is to know this new position or this new key signature, or maybe write in some F sharps if this is new to them. So if you kind of know your student well enough to know where those potential pitfalls are, but otherwise they're fairly independent, then the writing and hints on the page might be the trick. What kind of things would you write in? Again, accidentals or key signature hints. For a younger student, the position of their hands. And by the way, I have these post-it templates you can print out, different types of things you can just stick on the page. I also find that they are much more likely to be noticed if they're on a neon post-it that I printed out. My students love them. They're like, are you going to use one of your post-its? Rather than just penciling it in and hoping and praying that they see it. You might also write in a hint about a repeat or a DCL fine if you suspect they're going to go right onto the coda when they're not supposed to, something like that. Some of the pros of this are that the student is still challenged to do 95% of the sight reading at home. And you do still get an idea of their sight reading and practice at home routine from this method. And you are still saving quite a bit of time in your lesson if you're short on time at the end of the lesson. Some of the potential cons are that even with your hints, they'll still get something major wrong, or they might get frustrated. They might get their hands in the right position because you wrote it out for them, but then from there, they couldn't quite get the skips or whatever it is, wherever they're at in their journey. Another potential pitfall is that they might get the rhythm wrong because you gave them note hints but didn't play it for them. So things to keep in mind, and that is number 5 is to send them home with some hints written in the book. The 6th way to introduce a new page in the book to your piano students is to ask them questions. So this is kind of the guided sight reading. This can also be a music theory moment, not in the music theory book, but talking about theory in the lesson performance book. What kind of questions do you ask? Questions like, where do you think the hands go for this one? So instead of showing them or telling them or expecting them to just figure it out, you're sort of guiding them towards the right answer. What key is this in? So that means the B's will be, you know what I mean? Giving them all those hints to make them sight read it successfully by asking the right questions. You could have them write in the answers that they come up with, or you could write them in as well. This is often combined with another method as well. You could ask questions and then have them sight read. Or you could ask the questions first so they're looking, and then you could play that for them. Whatever combination you think they need and you have time for. I just recently did a review of the Piano Pronto method, which interestingly enough has these questions written right into the lesson book, which is really cool. Some of the pros for asking questions is that the student is actually guided towards becoming an independent reader. You're actually showing them how to sight read successfully by asking the right questions and guiding their answers. So another pro is that they're on their own, but they're not really on their own. And you can cater the questions for their age and their level and how quickly they pick up on things. Some of the cons of this would be that it's a more time-consuming option because you're kind of step-by-step leading them towards the sight reading. So this is going to take a few minutes on its own, plus it's usually paired with another option, so you really do want to make sure that you have the time to carve out in order to do the question asking process. Okay, it's time for number 7, which I feel like is the most unique of this list. So if you felt like, yeah, I already know that. Yeah, I already know that. Okay, let me see if I can surprise you with number 7, hopefully. But before I do, hit that like button. If you're liking the piano teacher tips and sort of lesson guidance, hit the subscribe button if you want to see my face again. So number 7 is to introduce a new song to your piano students by playing games. That's right, playing games. You can turn anything into a game. If you have the time to spare in your lesson, or your student is like, you're kind of losing them, they're a little bored, you know, with the routine, or they need some extra support, but you don't want to make them feel bad, like they're a slow learner, you want to keep it upbeat and fun, then perhaps introducing a song by playing a game is the way to go. Now, a game does not have to be like a big game. I'm not talking about like getting out the Candyland board or anything like that. Gamify the process is what I'm talking about. So if we're talking about listening, introducing by listening to the song, then think about what element of the song the method book is trying to emphasize and then turn that into like an ear training game. So sometimes I will have the students sit right here with the book in front of them. They're looking at the new page that they've never played before, and I will go around the corner to another piano where they can't see me, but they can hear me. And I will play a little portion of it. I show them where I'm playing so they can look and listen at the same time. I play it 2 ways. One way is right and one way is wrong. I could leave out some staccatos if staccatos is the main focus. I could leave out the F sharp if we're just learning the key of G major. You know, anything that you think they might miss, instead of letting them miss it and then correcting them, which is discouraging, you're missing it first and they're the teacher and they correct you. Another way I do this is with tempos, like I could play at the right tempo or wrong tempo, or I'll have the student pick the tempo. So that way they're hearing a portion of the song. Let's say there's like a tricky syncopated rhythm. I'll be like, I'm going to play this part for you, and I want you to tell me between these 5 tempos which one you want to do, or we could roll a dice for the tempo. So I'll play it for them way too fast, right? And then I'll play it way too slow and they giggle. It's so funny. And then I'll play it the right way somewhere in there, and we'll talk about which one is the right way. After doing that, they've literally heard that rhythm so many times that it's going to stick in their musical memory. Another one I like to do is I will pick a portion of the song to play. I'll play it maybe 2 or 3 times, and then I let them figure out what part of the song I'm playing. So I don't tell them what I'm playing, I just play it. And then so they're having to basically sight read through the entire piece with their eyes, trying to find that rhythm or those notes that they hear me play. If you don't want to do listening, you can also use dice to just simply engage with the piece at the piano, like the two of you together. The student could roll the dice simply to see like what portion, what section, what measure they're going to sight read, and that way it's just a bite-sized portion, they don't feel overwhelmed. Or you can actually lay the book flat and then roll the dice onto the book, and then wherever the die or dice land, then that's where they play. And there are endless possibilities for games using dice. If you want some more ideas, I have an entire video about how to use dice in your lesson, so be sure to check that out. And finally, sometimes I'll do a repeat situation. So in the same regard, I'll be at a separate piano while they're here. I will say, okay, I'll play measure one, you play measure one. And if you gamify that process, that can be really fun too, because you could get silly with it, right? You're like, okay, we're gonna play it like a snail now. You play it super slow, and then we're gonna play it really fast, and then they like can't do it and they start giggling. You know your student best, but just find a way to gamify the process if you think that that will make it more fun. Oh, and one more, that's not really a game, but like literally anything can be called a game, right? If it's fun. So using the different sounds on your keyboard. So let them pick the sound and then sight read the piece with that. Yeah, I know, you might not be able to hear the staccatos if they pick the bass guitar sound, or you might not, but don't worry about it. You can always hear it on the piano next time, but let them have a little fun with it so that the process doesn't feel so tedious. All right, everything I mentioned as far as the videos that I alluded to, those links are all down below. And if you are looking for more fun, actual games, worksheets, printables, stuff like that to help you teach piano lessons in a more fun, engaging, and successful way, I have an entire store with printables galore for every student in my Teachers Pay Teachers store, so be sure to check out that link as well if you want some more fun ideas. And I will leave you with that video all about using dice to make lessons more fun. I hope to see you there or on another video very soon. Thank you for sticking around to the end. I'll see you next time.